On a humid afternoon in Austin, Texas, the air clung to the skin, making everyone feel restless. Sarah found herself in the old house of her friend Lucy, sorting through the remnants of Lucy's life, items left behind in the wake of her sudden departure. Lucy's father, Mark, was a tall man with broad shoulders and a deep voice that always carried a hint of authority. He had always been kind to Sarah, offering her cold drinks and asking about her mother, but today there was something different in his gaze, a glint she couldn't quite place. They were in the living room, surrounded by boxes filled with Lucy's books and clothes. The weight of Lucy's absence hung heavily in the air, a constant reminder of the stories and memories that now felt scattered and incomplete. As they worked through the boxes, Mark suggested they take a break. Sarah nodded, wiping the sweat from her brow, grateful for a moment to breathe before diving back into the chaos. He led her down the narrow hallway toward the kitchen, where the faint smell of old coffee lingered. When they reached the bathroom door, she assumed he was just going to grab a towel or something to help with the heat. Instead, he turned to her with an unreadable expression, gesturing for her to follow him inside. A slight twist of anxiety knotted in her stomach, but she brushed it aside. This was Mark, Lucy's father. She had known him for years. There was nothing to worry about, right? The bathroom was small and dimly lit, the cool tiles pressing against her bare feet. As she stepped inside, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror above the sink. Her dark curls clung to the back of her neck from the heat, and her face was flushed from the effort of sorting through the boxes. Just as she began to feel a sense of relaxation, Mark closed the door behind them, the soft click of the lock sending a jolt through her. Her heart skipped a beat. She glanced at him, confusion bubbling up inside her, but he remained silent, leaning against the sink, his eyes locked onto hers. His gaze felt heavier than it should, making her uncomfortable under its weight. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and almost a whisper, as if choosing his words with care. "You're a beautiful girl, you know that, right?" Sarah froze, unsure how to respond. Compliments had always made her shy, but this felt different, out of place. The way his voice lingered on each word suggested there was something more beneath the surface, something that made her skin prickle with unease. She managed a small smile, her throat tight, and murmured a quiet thank you, though her mind raced with questions. What was happening here? Why did it feel like the air in the room had suddenly thickened? He stepped closer, and she caught the faint scent of his cologne mingling with the humid air. She wanted to retreat, to put some distance between them, but she felt frozen in place. His presence was too close, too overwhelming. His eyes remained fixed on hers, but they also drifted downward, taking in how her dress clung to her body, the way her curves caught the light. She wore a vibrant red cotton dress that hugged her hips, accentuating her figure in the heat of the day. Her braided leather sandals crossed elegantly over her feet, and a simple silver necklace with a cross pendant hung just above her neckline, adding a subtle touch of charm. As he moved even closer, his next words sent a shiver down her spine. The air in the small restroom felt thick and heavy, as if it were charged with an unspoken tension. Sarah stood frozen, her heart racing, as Antonio leaned casually against the sink, his gaze unwavering. He had always been a steady presence in her life, a friend of her older sister, Lucia, someone she trusted. But the way he looked at her now sent a shiver down her spine. "I've noticed you," he said, his voice smooth and deliberate, as if he were choosing each word carefully. The compliment hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "Your figure, your smile, everything about you is special." The words felt like a weight pressing down on her, and she struggled to find her voice. "Thank you," she managed, her throat tight. But as she spoke, she felt her cheeks flush, warmth spreading across her skin. She averted her gaze, focusing on her sandals, the braided leather strap suddenly the most interesting thing in the room. The silence between them stretched, filled only by the sound of her heart pounding in her ears. Antonio stepped closer, and the faint scent of his cologne mixed with the humid air, enveloping her. She felt exposed, vulnerable under his scrutiny. The dim light of the restroom cast shadows across his face, but his eyes were bright, almost predatory, as they roamed over her. She felt a knot form in her stomach, a mix of confusion and something deeper that she didn't want to acknowledge. "Sarah," he said, his tone shifting to something more serious, more intimate. "I want to offer you $500. The words hit her like a cold wave crashing against her chest. Just a moment, a brief moment together. Nothing complicated, just you and me here. $500. The number echoed in her mind, drowning out everything else. She was 22, working part-time at a restaurant, barely scraping by each month. That amount could mean new shoes, a month's rent paid, a chance to breathe without the constant weight of financial worries. But it wasn't just the money, it was the way he said it, so calm and assured, as if he believed it was something she would want, something to be exchanged. His gaze shifted, no longer the casual indifference she was used to. He looked at her as if she were something to be desired, something worth possessing. It was as if he was seeing her for the first time, not as Lucia's little sister, but as a woman. The weight of his stare twisted her stomach, a strange blend of fear and something else, something exhilarating. Her pulse quickened, thoughts swirling chaotically in her mind. She stood there, paralyzed, her heart racing so loudly she was sure he could hear it too. A part of her, the logical part, screamed for her to run, to slip past him and escape the confines of the restroom. She wanted to shout, to demand to know what he was thinking, to remind him of who she was. But instead, she remained silent, caught in the web of his gaze, feeling the air grow thicker around them. The moment stretched on, each second feeling like an eternity, and she could feel the tension crackling between them. The restroom was dimly lit, the flickering fluorescent lights casting a pale glow on the tiled walls. Sarah stood frozen, her heart racing as she processed the words that had just escaped Antonio's lips. He was the father of her best friend, Lucia, a man who had always been a mentor and protector to her. Yet here he was, offering her something that felt both enticing and terrifying. "Are you serious?" she finally managed to whisper, her voice barely above a breath. The air felt thick, charged with an unspoken tension that wrapped around them like a shroud. Antonio's gaze was steady, his expression a mix of confidence and something deeper, something that made her stomach twist. Just a moment, a brief moment together. Nothing complicated, just you and me here. The offer hung in the air, heavy and palpable. $500. The number echoed in her mind, drowning out everything else. She was 22, juggling a part-time job at a diner, barely making ends meet. That amount could mean new shoes, a month's rent paid, a chance to breathe without the constant weight of financial worries. But it wasn't just the money, it was the way he said it, so calm and assured, as if he believed it was something she would want, something to be exchanged. A part of her, the logical part, screamed for her to run, to slip past him and escape the confines of the restroom. She wanted to shout, to demand to know what he was thinking, to remind him of who she was. But instead, she remained silent, caught in the web of his gaze, feeling the air grow thicker around them. "Do you really think I would agree to this?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly, betraying the mix of fear and intrigue that coursed through her. "I think you're tired of always being the good girl," he replied, his tone smooth and persuasive. "You're always taking care of everyone else. What about you? What do you want?" His words struck a chord deep within her. She thought of Lucia, of how her friend would react if she knew. Would she understand? Would she forgive her? The thought of disappointing Lucia twisted her heart, but there was another part of her that felt drawn to the idea of stepping outside the boundaries she had always imposed on herself. Is it really so terrible to step outside those limits just this once, she pondered, her mind racing. The weight of her life pressed down on her, always feeling like she was one step behind, always trying to catch up. And then there was Antonio, his intense gaze making her feel like she was worth more than the girl she had always been told she was. Okay, she murmured, the words slipping from her lips before she could fully comprehend what she was agreeing to. It felt surreal, as if she were watching herself from outside her body, suspended in time between decision and consequence. Antonio's face lit up with a smile that was not one of happiness or relief, but rather the kind of smile that signaled victory. Good, he said softly, his voice almost too gentle. Relax, you won't regret this. Regret. The word floated in the air like a shadow, but she pushed it aside as he stepped closer, filling the space between them with his presence, his scent, his promise. She stood there, barely breathing, unable to move, like a puppet pulled by strings, caught in forces she couldn't control. There was an urgency in his movements, the way his hands reached out, but also something calculated, almost rehearsed. What happened next blurred in her mind, a series of movements that felt disconnected, like a dream she couldn't fully grasp. Nerves twisted in her stomach, and adrenaline surged through her veins, making her feel like she was caught in a storm from which she couldn't escape. And then there was something else, something deeper and darker, something she couldn't name. Perhaps it was fear, or perhaps it was that strange feeling of wanting to take control, even if just a little. Antonio was gentle. She had to give him that. His hands were soft, careful, tracing the lines of her body as if he were memorizing her silhouette. His fingers lingered in places that felt forbidden, but his touch didn't feel demanding. Not at first. Instead, it was as if he were studying her, savoring every inch of her skin as if he had all the time in the world. He kept murmuring, his voice low and almost soothing, telling her how beautiful she was, how perfect. It wasn't the first time she had heard those words, but they had never sounded so hollow, so empty. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe them. She wanted to be someone worth looking at, someone worth desiring, but deep down, she knew that wasn't truly her. She understood it was just a transaction. She wasn't beautiful in his eyes, she was merely a means to an end. His touch was a commodity, his whispers nothing more than a sales pitch. But somewhere beneath layers of disgust and confusion, she found a place for herself. She tried to enjoy it, or at least convince herself to. She focused on the money, on the crisp bills waiting for her, the promise of an escape. His hands continued to move, slow and deliberate, as if each touch was a small promise, a promise that he would give her something in return. In that moment, she felt a flicker of control, a sense that she could manage this. She told herself it was just a game, a brief escape from the life she had always known. But as she stood there, caught in the tension of the moment, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was teetering on the edge of something she couldn't fully comprehend. The moment felt surreal, just as he had said, a brief transaction, nothing more. Like a store where you give and receive. Once the exchange was complete, the world around her seemed to quiet down, yet it felt hollow, empty. Her body still vibrated with the echoes of what had just happened, while her mind remained distant, disconnected. Antonio handed her the money, 5 crisp $100 bills that he placed delicately in her palm, as if they were fragile and precious. She stared at him, her fingers trembling as she gripped the cash, feeling its weight resting in her hand. That weight was both heavy and light. Heavy because she understood what it meant. Light because it didn't bring her any relief. The money was not a solution, it wouldn't fill the void inside her or erase what had just occurred. She thought about how easily it had passed from his hands to hers, as if it were nothing more than a simple transaction. Antonio thanked her in a soft, almost intimate voice, as if he believed they shared something, a kind of understanding. He told her to keep it between them. Those words hung in the air like a request or a demand. She nodded, her throat tight, struggling to swallow the lump that had formed. Her heart raced, her pulse thundering in her ears, rendering her speechless. She shoved the money into her bag without looking at it, feeling its coldness against her skin. Then she turned and exited the bathroom, her legs shaking, her body moving on autopilot. She left the house without glancing back, her mind still trying to process everything that had happened. The door clicked shut behind her. As she stepped into the outside world, she realized it was the first time in a long while that she didn't know where she was going, and she wasn't sure if she would ever find her way. That night, lying in bed with her eyes fixed on the ceiling, the money tucked away in a sock in her drawer, she replayed everything in her mind. The bathroom, those words, the way she had said yes. She felt a strange mix of shame and power, as if she had crossed a line while taking something for herself. She thought about what she could do with that money, how it could change things, even if just a little. But she also thought of Lucia, knowing she could never tell her, that this secret would always stand between them like a wall. The following days felt odd. She returned to work, smiling at customers and acting as if nothing had changed, even though everything had. She began to notice things more acutely, the glances from men, the way she carried herself. She felt older, as if she had discovered a part of the world she had previously ignored. Antonio called several times, asking if she wanted to see him again, but she didn't respond. She wasn't sure if it was fear or if she was simply fed up. Perhaps it was both. She spent the money slowly, carefully, a new dress, a nice dinner, a little extra to help her mother with her bills. Each time she used it, she felt a pang of guilt, but also a touch of pride. She had made a decision, a difficult one, and she was surviving because of it. She told herself that was life, making tough choices and living with them. Sometimes, she found herself thinking about Antonio, about how he had looked at her, as if she were more than just Maria from the restaurant. It wasn't love or anything like that, but it was something, attention, desire, a kind of validation she hadn't realized she needed. She wondered if that made her weak or strong, or perhaps just human. Lucia called her a few weeks later, her voice bright and filled with stories about her new life. Maria listened, laughing at her jokes, but her heart tightened. She wanted to tell her everything, to release the truth and let it go. She wanted Lucia to understand, but she couldn't. Not because of Antonio, but because of herself. She wasn't ready to face what she had done, not out loud. As time passed, she began to reflect more on her choices, on the path she had taken. Each day felt like a balancing act between her old life and the new reality she was navigating. The weight of her secret pressed down on her, yet it also fueled a quiet determination. She was learning to carve out a space for herself, to find her footing in a world that felt both familiar and foreign. The days turned into weeks, and the memory of that night lingered in her mind like an uninvited guest. She tried to push it aside, to focus on her work and her family, but it was always there, a constant reminder of the line she had crossed. Each time she caught a glimpse of her reflection, she wondered who she had become. And yet, amidst the confusion and the turmoil, there was a flicker of hope. She began to envision a future where she could reclaim her narrative, where the choices she made would lead her to a life she truly desired. It was a long road ahead, but for the first time in a while, she felt a sense of agency, a belief that she could shape her destiny. As she lay in bed one night, staring at the ceiling, she made a silent promise to herself. She would not let this define her. She would rise above it, and in doing so, she would find her way back to the person she wanted to be. The journey wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to take the first step. The moment in the bathroom lingered in her mind, not as a source of shame, but as a silent, unsettling awakening. It wasn't the money or the man that occupied her thoughts, it was something much deeper, something she hadn't fully understood about herself until that moment. That brief and strange interaction had cracked open a part of her soul, revealing aspects she had long ignored. It wasn't merely about making a decision, it was about claiming her own choices, even if they terrified her. For too long, she had seen herself as a victim, a passenger in her own life, swept along by the currents of circumstance. She had been at the mercy of what the world threw her way, trapped in a cycle of survival without truly living. But now, with that memory echoing in the depths of her mind, she realized something profound: she had the power to choose. She could make decisions, sometimes dangerous, sometimes regrettable, but they were hers. Even if they were twisted or messy in hindsight, they still belonged to her, and she could not deny that ownership. It was a painful realization that gnawed at her, sending chills down her spine at times. The weight of it felt like a heavy coat she didn't know how to wear, struggling to reconcile who she thought she was with who she had become. She had crossed a line she knew she should never have crossed. Yet, there was a strange sense of power in that crossing. She had done something frightening, and in doing so, she had proven to herself that she was stronger than she ever believed. No longer was she the girl waiting for someone to come and save her. She had learned in the most painful and difficult moments that survival wasn't just about getting through the days, it was about adapting, evolving, finding ways to move forward when the world seemed determined to overpower her. The world had its rules, but she was learning to bend them to her will. Perhaps growing up was about finding oneself not in moments of triumph, but in the darkest times, when the choices you make don't align with the image you had of yourself. Yet somehow, those choices become the key to understanding your true identity. It was a harsh truth, a heartbreaking truth, but one she could no longer ignore. She had the strength to survive, even when her choices didn't resemble what she had imagined. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of something more. The hardest part was living with those choices, with the silent secrets that built walls around her heart, preventing her from truly knowing who she was. Yet, even as those walls rose, she was learning to live with them, to smile beyond them. Some days, she found herself staring into the mirror, questioning if the person she saw was truly her. It was a face that had known both the weight of guilt and the lightness of freedom. And she understood that was the price of living. Her name was Maria. This was her story. It was confusing and complicated. It wasn't the one she had imagined, but it was hers, raw and authentic. She was learning to carry it step by step, forging a path that no one else could walk for her. Perhaps therein lay the true meaning of growth, finding a way to move forward even when the destination was uncertain. As she walked through the cobblestone streets of New Orleans that night, the echoes of unanswered calls on her phone ringing in her ears, she felt a new tug within her, a forbidden desire she couldn't ignore. She wondered if she would cross paths with him again or if the secret would bind them anew in a dance of shadows that had only just begun. Subscribe to the channel,